night, depending on the time you're watching this. It's Monday, and we are time traveling because, as you know, here in Spain, where I am, it's 5 p.m. But where our guest is 8 a.m. in the morning. He's not just an amazing writer, a genius writer. He's a fucking amazing human being for being here so early. Let's say it. Let's say it. So, time traveling from Spain. Hello to San Francisco.
No, 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 no. Las Vegas.
Las Vegas now. Okay, so
Yes.
Las Vegas. So what time is it for you now? It's 8.
It is 8, just past 8 o'clock. Yes.
This
And
man
I,
is a saint. This man is a saint. Just so you know, guys. How's things for you, James? How's everything? Is the pandemic getting better around there? Situation
Yes.
in life, or just
Yes.
crazy as usual?
Unfortunately, there's that element in the world that is scared of masks and scared of the vaccinations and all of that, and is scared of science. There's quite a few of them around Vegas, so the masks are already coming down, and people are going back to their lives of going to bars and the casinos and everything else. Which it's funny. I live in Vegas, but I don't really partake of that world. So it's back to normal. Yeah.
Have you had any temptations, when you were seeing that craziness going back to normal of moving out, or you're like, you know what, this is part of the part for the course of living here?
No, it's just part of the course. I mean, the thing is that I have I went from San Francisco when I met my current wife. Well, my wife, I shouldn't say my current wife. That's like I have plans for one after her. But
it's early, guys. It's early. It's normal. It's early.
When I met her, I was at a kind of a crossroads. I was living in San Francisco, which is where you thought I still was, and I had a lovely apartment in terms of its location and its view of the city, but it was very, very expensive. It was a rental, and my mortgage for a very 3,000 square foot house. It's a large house with a pool and a pool house. Everything is like the mortgage is half of that. So that was the incentive to move to Vegas. We moved to downtown, which is an area with all the old mid-century houses and all of that. So I have this sort of little oasis of creativity and my books, and we have a whole library, another whole room that's filled with books. But once I leave this little haven and you go out into the real world of Vegas, it's kind of it always seems like the saddest line in a Tom Waits song. It's just sort of, everybody's kind of beaten down and kind of one paycheck, hoping for that win, or one paycheck away from whatever. It's just a mess. But I don't know where else I would move. My wife is very much, she's like, I don't know, half, 3/4 Native American. So she loves the sun. So I can't imagine her being happy in Vermont or somewhere where it's snowy all the time. But we talk about moving to Spain more than once. I'm constantly, it's sort of on my mind constantly. So one day you might see me coming over for Sunday dinner.
That wouldn't be a bad thing at all. I miss seeing your face, so let's plan for that and to take you here, even if it's for I don't know, convention or something like that, so you guys can do a tour of the country, and then we'll see. I know how to tempt people. So
I've been to Barcelona twice, and I loved it both times. I love Barcelona. So and I know that's what Catalonia.
Catalonia, yes, Catalonia, yeah.
So it's a slightly different feel than Madrid or anything more south, but I mean, Spain is cultured. It has great food, great wine. The people as a whole, I find to be a very, very charming group of people.
Yeah.
So, to spend my September years in a place like that could be worse.
Couldn't be bad. No, but to be honest, the funny thing, and I love it. There's some people in Spain who doesn't like it. They would prefer, people to be more or less the same all over the country. We're not. I am from Galicia in the northwest. We're Celts.
Right.
We are not similar to the rest of Spain at all. We are all really, pale skin, tend to be, red-headed. Of course, as you know, Galicians go.
Blue. It's hard to see from here. You have blue eyes, don't you?
Blue eyes, yeah, blue eyes.
Yes.
Blue eyes. When I had hair, tend to be reddish. But we are very different and as you know, Galicians went north. Galicia means land of the Celts, literally in Latin. Went north and then to England, to Scotland and Ireland. So, but then with Andalusians, are darker skinned. It's every part of Spain in terms of culture and in terms of the kind of people. We're very different. But that's what makes us culturally so rich. I always love that. But so when people tell me, "Oh, you guys are so different from that, that's a bad thing," I'm like, no, that makes our culture much richer.
Well,
Because
I have sundry. I have a few image books that are on the slow burner because image books take a long time to get up and rolling because of
Mhm.
the economics of doing comics.
Yeah.
But when there's a little bit when I'm a little bit more of a when I have a little bit more going with the comics again, maybe I can do a convention and come over. That would be lovely.
We'll make it happen. Sooner or later, we'll make it happen.
Sooner or
So
later, yeah.
you just hold me to my word, and then when it's time, we'll make it happen. Let me ask you this: why, of all the chances you had as a writer, you picked the most masochistic one, which is doing comics?
Well, it was funny. I mean, it's an odd story. I had gone to film school in England. I have a degree in filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I came out of film school thinking, oh, I'm going to just walk into a job in films and be discovered and be, Orson Welles at 20, whatever I was, 23. Well, that didn't happen. But in the interim, while I was looking for work, I got a job initially as the tidying up the office at Titan Books,
Mm-hmm.
which is a subsidiary or connected to Forbidden Planet and Titan distributors, which is all stuff in London.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, they were just beginning to do some original stuff, but they were doing all the 2000 AD reprints.
Mm-hmm.
And they were not a place that paid very well at the time, so they didn't always have people that were very good at what they did. So as a result, very quickly I went up the chain and I was just being paid cash in hand. I wasn't even officially employed, but I ended up being the editor within like 6 months, the editor of the whole Titan Books line. And it's not because I had any grand design; it's just because I had more of an aptitude for it than some of the other people.
Mm-hmm.
So while that was going on, Escape, which was a more independent anthology magazine, Escape
Mm-hmm.
magazine, co-published with Titan their first graphic novel, which was Violent Cases with Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean. And I was like, I could do that. Arrogant young man. I could write a comic book. And when I had been at film school, I was interested in directing and lighting and sound and all the technical stuff. And really, the idea of ever writing, I didn't write any of the scripts that we worked on when I was at film school. But how everybody says, I'm going to be a writer, they're not very good. But there has to be once in a while that person that has that talent for it and didn't realize they had that talent.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of those lucky few. So I wrote London's Dark, which was done with Paul Johnson. And that got me into the attention of like Matt Wagner and Archie Goodwin. And between them, they sort of set me on a path of comic book writing, which I had no plans to originally to do. It was going to be films, and then it took many years until I sort of got into films, and that was a sort of side thing that I was doing while I was writing comics for many years.
Mm-hmm. And what keeps you coming back? Because you had many chances, as as people know here, and if they don't, I'll say it. You're executive producing, also Stargirl for the CW.
Yes.
Why do you keep coming back? Why do you say, you know what? I got my original goal. Screw this.
Well, I tried that back when I was what happened? So when I first sold a spec with David Goyer,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, oh, I'll slowly, I'll finish Starman. I had always intention of seeing that all the way through, but at the same time, I was like, I'll slowly let things wind down, and I did to a degree. I was transitioning out of my first marriage and sort of just changing who I was as a person to quite a large degree. And I tried to get out of it, but there was always something that draws me back. I have to say that in terms of the comics I read now, I don't really read Marvel or DC anymore because I think, and this isn't knocking them to anyone that reads them, but when you have been in the industry and been reading comics for as long as I have, after a while you're like, Batman is going to fight the Joker again. You know, it feels like it's the same stories, just with a new coat of paint, and that isn't any knocking the artists and writers working on them. I mean, I'm sure they're great stories, but I just feel like I don't need to read those stories anymore. But at the same time, I go out, I read the Image books. I love what bande dessinée I can find that's been translated. I love the medium, basically. It is a truly unique medium. I've likened it in a way, having worked in film and television. It's a little bit like you're writing a screenplay and you're storyboarding it and you're editing it all at the same time. And there really isn't a medium like it. So that's what always draws me back to it. But the idea of, you know, owning what I write, I mean, you know, one of the other things about working for Marvel or DC is there is a degree of them taking advantage of creators in terms of how much they pay and the profits and all of that sort of thing. So, and it's becoming a little bit more evident when you see, you know, people like Ed Brubaker a bit irked by how much they're using Winter Soldier and he gets nothing for it and stuff like that. And the answer to that is, well, you signed the contract. You know, I mean, I love Ed's work, but I'm just saying this is the thing you say to anybody. You signed the contract. You knew what you were doing when you went in. So it's a bit hard to really feel, you know, bad about it. But at the same time, you know, work for yourself now. Go on and find your own place. And you know, Ed Brubaker, of all people, has definitely done that. And his work now is, I think, fresher and more exciting than ever. Those Reckless books he's doing and the panel syndicate thing he's doing with Marcus Martin are all fantastic. So long story, long rambling answer. The reason that I'm drawn back to comics constantly is because I love the medium. But now I'm sort of doing my own stuff. It's a lot more challenging, but also a lot more rewarding.
Absolutely. And there's also a part of, you know, when I get that, you knew when you getting in, when you signed the contract, I always said, yes, but there's a human being behind it. You know, yes, you knew it, but the moment you see a character being on a TV show and that you get nothing, even if you knew, even if you still know, it's normal that Ed feels, I did all that work for so many years and I get nothing. Even if you knew, you know, we are human beings. That's a natural reaction. If you reacted like, you know, I don't care. Like, man, are you a cyborg or something? No, if you're human, that's a natural reaction to have, right?
Yeah. I mean, it goes all the way up. I mean, even like Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons with Watchmen. I mean, they were upset, and I think maybe we all were a little bit that the book that the Watchmen was sort of has been turned into this new entity within DC. But the fact is that had Dick Giordano back in the day said, "I love this pitch for the Charlton characters. That's what it was originally for. Let's do it." Then it would have been a fantastic series with the Charlton characters, and there would have been no doubt that DC owned it.
Yeah.
So it's so yes, you have to be aware going in about contracts, but at the same time, when you have the opportunity to do stuff yourself, it is just so much more rewarding and more fun and something you can take pride in, and also it makes money while you're sleeping, which is an expression I learned from Michael Caine's autobiography.
I love that one. I didn't know it.
He claimed to have given Vidal Sassoon, who was the hot hairdresser in the 60s in London, the idea of starting his own shampoos and hair products and stuff like that. And he said to Vidal, "You should make money while you're sleeping," and that's where I got that from. So,
I love that phrase. I love that quote. Before any of the answers, let me ask you this. I know the answer, but I have to because I know people are going to ask. Is there any chance that Leave It to Chance ever returns?
I don't know. I mean, definitely, it's a very frustrating. It is a very frustrating situation because I co-own it with Paul Smith, and he is an odd fellow, and he has just become this recluse. And I don't mean like like, you know, doesn't like to talk to many people. It's like he's Howard Hughes or something.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point he decided he was kind of over the idea of doing comics.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, he won't communicate with anybody. He won't communicate with me. He won't communicate with Image. I got a call from DC because he just kind of if you remember, the last thing he did was after Darwin Cook finished his run on the Spirit, they had Mike Plug and Paul Smith doing it every other issue. And he did one whole issue, and then he done half of it. And I got a call from Jerry Cavalieri, who was the editor at the time, saying, "Do you know where Paul is? Because he's just vanished, and we need the second half of the issue." And then I got a call from Image saying, "Hey," because we had a bit more, some Leave It to Chance royalties from when they had done issue 13 of the series, and he had said, he hasn't. Do you know if he's okay? Because we sent him a royalty check. We sent you one too, obviously. I cashed money. I put money in the bank. He said, still hasn't cashed it. It was months and months and months. So it's I can't get hold of him to do more work, and it's kind of frustrating because he laid out. We had the whole thing ready. My plan was the original plan with Leave It to Chance was that we were going to finish the storyline that we had running, which would have ended with issue 15, and then so that Paul could do other stuff and whatever. We were going to do like Tintin volumes or bande dessinée, like finite stories.
Yeah.
And he laid out issues 14 and 15, and he's even had the sort of gall or whatever the word is to put them on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
But he won't finish it, and so I know Image. I mean, and I've had calls from Scholastic Press and Image and IDW all wanting to do it. Who was the other one? The guy, forgive me for forgetting his name at first thing in the morning. He does the Goon. Eric
Powell. Yeah.
Yeah, he started his own little publishing company. So they were all interested, and I would have been interested in any of them working on it. So I'm looking into the legalities of doing more, but I don't know how possible that is. Again, I'm the king of long rambling answers, but
no. I love that answer because, of course, my next question was going to be exactly that. You know, if he's not interested, or even in comics, and it's true in my case too, because there was a time when he literally stopped answering any email, like literally from boom, it's like he disappeared, and I stopped trying after a couple of years, I think. But the thing is,
I think what one of the things with him is I know his father died.
Mm-hmm.
And left him a property. So if he does one, like fan drawing, I seem to recall actually seeing one which was like Captain America and the Blackhawks.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have that, fantasy idea that you've, Phantom Lady from World War II meets Phantom Girl from the Legion of Superheroes or something like that. He can draw that. He charges, whatever they charge, $800, and that's his nut for the whole month. He doesn't need to do anything else.
Yeah, I know.
So that's his cocoon-like world he's in.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was going to ask: is if there's a chance of you continuing the book with another artist. If he's not interested, would he block? Well, you don't even know if he would block it or not because he's not answering.
No, I have no idea. So that's something we'll have to keep our fingers crossed and see how that plays out in the future. But there are other books I'm working on, and I'm doing one at the moment, which is all ages. And by all ages, I just mean it can be enjoyed by someone who's 10 years old, but also could be enjoyed by an adult, as opposed to writing a story that's just for 10-year-olds. Which, unfortunately, with comics now, one of the things I find, and I find it annoying a little bit, is not the Image books where you basically tell the story you want to tell and it's the comic book medium, but within like Marvel and DC, I often wonder who these comics are for, because like everybody's having sex with everybody else, everybody's dealing with stuff that, and I'm no prude. I mean, this is stuff that's been in my world and my comics, but I just find sometimes I wish the books were a little bit more inviting for more people, more ages. I feel that's gotten lost somewhere. Yeah, and it's just a bunch of 20-year-olds reading comics now, as opposed to teenagers and 10-year-olds and stuff like that.
Yeah,
with the big two.
I agree. In many cases, it's a closed up, fortress where only the people that's already in can enjoy it. But
Right.
there's some exception, like Miss Marvel or Squirrel Girl. With new
Oh yeah.
characters, you see that they're opening and inviting for new readers. So
Yes.
that's what I'm hoping for. More. And I've talked about it with CB and other people at Marvel, saying, if that's the gateway to get more people, we need more of those new characters, because the classic ones. I'm sorry, but that they are not for 10-year-olds. They are not. A Spider-Man today is for 25, 30 minimum.
Yes.
And that's the
Yeah.
reader with the captive reader. It's like, we don't need the captive reader. We already have it. We need new ones.
Yes, and I also, I mean, this is a little bit depressing. I don't think about comic books, but I do feel also that captive readers, they're dying off, or for other reasons are drifting away from comics, and you're losing that readership. So you're by continuing things the way they are, you are predetermining that eventually it will die out.
Yeah, but by the end of the day, go please.
No, but I was saying, but I don't think the medium will die out. I think the comic book medium is still great, and I think Image and Boom and these other companies that are doing stuff that are finite stories that appeal to new readers. That will keep things going. If nothing else.
That's the part I was gonna say. That what I love is that's opening a lot of new possibilities for you guys to do stuff in other companies. If Marvel and DC, that's good. That's their fortress. That's how they work. They open with other things. Maybe they get new readers because of the movies. That's fine. But you guys are opening with Image, Boom, and any other company, Scholastic, blah, blah, blah. What you're doing is to bring new readers and a new kind of reader. You're getting young adults, female readers, Raina Tegelmeier, other kind of creators. By the end of the day, what you're doing is to open the market. And that's why I think it's so healthy, and it'll be more healthy in the future, because you guys are bringing new readers, and not with superheroes. You're bringing new readers with other stuff that people has been asking for decades to have in comics. And they didn't have. And now they have it because of of what you're doing, right?
So I forget what the question was, David.
Don't worry about it. Okay. What I think is, even with the Marvel and DC situation, as you said, the kind of comics they're doing, that's good because it's opening a door for you and other creators in other companies to just tell those stories that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the readers couldn't find.
Right. Well, I know when back in the day, I mean, it feels like it was yesterday, but it's actually quite a few years ago. I did write Scarlet Witch and Nick Fury for Marvel, both of them with the intention of bringing in new readers. One of the things that I have found talking to female readers, and there's always female readers that read X-Men and have followed it for years and all of that, but a lot of them don't like all that continuity. They want to understand the story, and they want to go into the story fresh. So with Scarlet Witch, as opposed to getting into all of the vision and it all, I tried to do something that was fresh and make it interesting with the choice of artists. Each issue was a different artist. And then with Nick Fury, I tried to do something where it was a kind of a fresh approach. He was like a Black James Bond. And luckily, I had Aiko, the artist. I don't know, do all 6 issues. Marvel at the time, I probably still have no idea, but they had this idea that people wanted comic books like they wanted not miniseries, seasons of HBO, like The Sopranos, where you'd come in and do 12 issues, and then you'd end the series, and you'd do another 12 issues, starting with a new number 1. And I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but that's what they did at the time. So that's why the series ran for as long as they ran. But I was happy that I got the chance to do them at the time. By the way, a quick question.
I'm going to go with this now. No, I always wait for them to 4 or 5 questions and then answer them. And I didn't want to interrupt you. So
that's fine. I just seeing them add up. There's quite a list.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Felipe González Hernández says, "Good afternoon, Mr. Robinson." Good morning for him. It's a pleasure having you in here. I have known your work since the Golden Age, and for me, it was a revelation. And Starman is a masterpiece.
Well, that's very nice. Thank you. Who was that? Where is that?
Felipe González Hernández. That's the first one.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
the second one, Felipe Abreu says, "Hello everyone. London After Night, was a great book." Felipe also says, "You made me love DC and its rich history. Jack Knight is a great character. Do you know the impact of your work will have? Do you want to return to Jack, or you have said everything you needed to say with that character?"
Well, yes and no. Firstly, thank you for those kind words. But a quick question. Philip Ebril, he says it's London after night. Is that like the English translation of it from a foreign language? Is like in Spanish or whatever?
No. I think Philip is British. Philip, clarify. Maybe it's just a typo.
Yeah. That's fine too. I was just curious if there was a translation into a translation.
No. Makes sense. That's why I said London After Dark, and then I corrected myself because I was like, wait, that's not what he says.
London After Night. Well, that's a nice alternate title, Philip. So bravo. Thank you for that. And then in terms of Jack Knight, to be honest with you, so Jack Knight to me is done, except that there was this story where he goes to Japan, and Tony and I had always sort of talked about going back to it, and various reasons why we didn't, and they're all really DC editorial. We wanted to do something back when Paul Levitz was in charge, and he placed all these weird restrictions on us doing it. I don't know why. Just he's a odd fellow. And then recently, like Tony has done a piece of artwork, and I wrote the entire outline out for. Originally, it was going to be for Mark Doyle or J.B. Rich or something, but because of all the editorial stuff, it isn't happening. I can tell you this, that Tony and I are. It's literally any day. I don't remember the date. I should check. But we're going to have a big interview for. There is an American. What's that one that Tomorrow's publishes?
Yeah, Tomorrow's publishes.
There's one that they always do different creators, and I don't know. I forgot the name of it. Comic something or other.
Modern Masters or Alter Ego. I know the magazine.
One of those.
Yeah.
There is one that's going to be me and Tony talking about Starman and working together, and it'll have all sorts of, artwork and whatnot. The cover for that is the piece of artwork because DC I guess aren't interested in doing any more Starman. So there you go. So that piece of artwork is the cover for the interview. So everybody will be able to see what Tony would have done had we been allowed to do this extra story. But in terms of, that, as I say, that is a flashback story that takes place somewhere between issue 27 and 29. But after that, the continuity is so tight that it's hard to sort of put that story anywhere else. But apart from that, I have told everything that needs to be told about Jack Knight. Yes.
Okay. Philip says, totally agree with James about the big two comic companies. Feels a lot like I have already read those stories.
Well, I mean, I again, I'm not knocking people that are newer to comics or that it's fresher material for them. But I just feel like, how often do I need to see Batman fight the Joker, or how often do this is the one thing I do notice. And I guess I am out of touch, so I know there are a couple of new characters in the Marvel world, in the Batman world, that seems to keep people interested, and a couple of heroes here and there. But like back in the real old days, there seemed to be new villains all the time, and they were constantly coming up with new stuff. But I just feel like it's always Galactus, or it's always Darkseid, or it's always the Joker. Magneto. It's always the same things, and like I say, it's just me personally, but that's how I feel.
Germán Ample, buenas. Hello, Germán. Felipe González says, I love your movie Comic Book Villains, a good script and characters, and an interesting plot and insight into this special medium. How did you come up with the idea, and why did you want to do it?
Well, I wanted to do it because I wanted to direct a movie. and I learned a lot from that. I could probably direct a pretty good film now, having gone through it and know the mistakes. The reason I wanted to they came up with the idea because obviously the Mile High collection, which for anybody that is not aware of this, it was kind of the first huge mega collection of perfect comics that was found. I guess what was this guy Chuck Rudinsky, is that his name?
Rosansky, Chuck Rosansky.
He found this old lady whose son or husband or someone had collected comics from day one, and there had been a drip in the roof of the attic where these comics were, and it had fallen on a small pile of comics and rotted them. But what it had done is produced the perfect atmosphere of whatever, moisture and dryness, whatever you need to keep all the other books pristine. And he began his whole business with that first find. So the idea of a treasure that slowly drives you crazy and makes you through desperation becomes more crazy, more violent, all of that, very much inspired by both The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, a great movie, John Huston, with Humphrey Bogart and Walter Houston, Tim Holt, I think. And then also The Lady Killers, which I watched with my wife the other night, actually, for the upteenth time. The Ealing comedy.
Yes, I was gonna say not the Coen Brothers remake, right?
Yeah, no, the original. And again, thieves, and it gets crazier and crazier. So I wrote this, and Lionsgate agreed to make it. And originally it was 30 days, and I forget how much the budget was originally, but it slowly got shaved down and shaved down and shaved down. And you tell yourself, because it's only like, we're not doing 30 days, we're doing 27 days. And you go, it's only 3 days. And then we're not doing 27, we're doing 24. And it got down to 20 days. And one of the things I learned is when you're doing comedy, and there was meant to be comedy in it, at the same time that there was, violence and murder and whatnot. It takes time. Like, I think Blood Simple, which was a very simple story, when you think about it, very simple story, but they had 40 days to shoot that. So the luxury of having like 2 days in that field in Blood Simple, where it's burying the body and things like that. When you have 20 days, you have to like shoot 5 pages of dialogue and an action stunt of some kind. We had a burning building, we had a car going into the water, we had all this stuff. So it was a bit frustrating in that it wasn't the amazing indie debut of a auteur. It was a little bit of a, it wasn't made for very much money. And on top of that, I didn't realize it at the time, but comic book fans felt I was attacking them, and I wasn't. I mean, the character at the end says I still read comics and enjoy them. The message was just that there's a world out there that you could embrace as well as enjoying comics. You can have a wife and children and a dog, all the stuff you have and still love comics. But people took that. There were people that took that really hard, which I'm sad about because it wasn't my intention. But I still enjoyed it. I love working with Donald Logue, and it was nice. He was interviewed a couple of years ago, and they actually brought that film up, and he said working with James Robinson was wonderful. He actually mentioned me. So nice. That was it.
Okay, Oscar Silence Death says, hi, Mr. Robinson. Which is your favorite JSA member? That's Oscar. That's like asking is your favorite daughter or son or your.
It's hard, yeah. That one.
That's not fair. That's not fair.
I'm looking at my All-Star, not my All-Star, my DC archives. I have all of the Golden Age ones. I guess my favorite is the Golden Age Hawkman. I mean, there isn't much in it. I like all of them. I like, obviously, Starman. But I think Hawkman, the thing about Hawkman is there are, in the reality of the Justice Society, was that when originally, if people know the sorry, I'm rambling a little bit.
No, you're not. Please go ahead.
I'm trying to think while I'm talking.
Yeah.
Some of the characters had less of a profile in the original comics. For instance, Wildcat was only in 2 issues.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Terrific was in 1 issue. So, and people forget that because they assume when they see the Justice Society from the Silver Age and present day that these characters have more of a presence. So when I think about it, I think about how important were they in the past. And Hawkman was a presence throughout. I've always loved his backstory, the reincarnation, the love of him and his wife, Hawkgirl, that goes through different generations and everything else. So I would have to say, in terms of Hawkman, but there's really not much in it. I mean, I love Alan Scott, I love Jay Garrick, I love all those characters. They're all wonderful to me in one way or another.
How fascinating!
That is a terrible answer, but that's all I got.
No, that's perfect. How fascinating or frustrating it is for you to with Hawkman and Hawkgirl to know that they reincarnate, but they're always they're always destined to lose each other and start again.
Well, I don't know if it's frustrating. I think that's sort of
No, that's what I was asking. If it's frustrating or fascinating, motivating as a writer.
It's fascinating because it's sort of a tragic. I mean, some tragedies can be beautiful. I mean, they fight each other again constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Each new encounter. So I find it quite fascinating, and it also means that there are all these stories, untold stories of different lives they've had and stuff like that, which appeals to me. And I even wrote one in Hawkman with Nighthawk and Cinnamon. So that aspect appeals to me very much.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. Felipe Gonzalez also says, I'd like to thank you for introducing Joe Casey into comics and giving him that great opportunity. I really liked your cable, and I wish to know what you would have done if you had continued. I was trying to translate at the same time I was reading.
Well, some of what I was going to do ended up I think Joe ended up doing some of it with like Black Panther and Sonar and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what one of the things that I was going to do was, my goal was at the time, I mean, things change constantly, but at the time at Marvel, it almost felt like 2 comic book companies. You had the X-Men books, and then you had all of the other Marvel characters.
Yes.
And they never, apart from the Beast, who was in the Avengers, they never really crossed over. And now that feels silly. We've seen, so it's so integrated now. I think it's actually a bit confusing sometimes with how much crossover there is. But my goal was to make Cable. I was going to bring him more into I wasn't going to have him meet that many X-Men characters. It was always going to be Marvel characters.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to incorporate him into like the Marvel universe more and make him this link between the 2 worlds, in a way. And then my goal, I mean, eventually Bendis put, Wolverine in the X-Men and everything, but my goal was to have him be an Avenger. That was my ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And then at the time that it all happened, I was just a bit overwhelmed, and I think, there was some personal stuff going on with my life, in my life, and it was too much for me. So Joe, I managed to, convince them to get Joe in as my replacement. Mark Powers was the editor. I remember he was a nice guy. I have no idea what he's doing anymore, but he was a nice guy, and he agreed to give Joe a chance with the understanding that if he flaked, I would step in and finish up. But Joe didn't. He did great work, and he's still doing great work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun to think that right now we're back in that situation with Marvel, where the X-Men, since Jonathan Hickman started, the X-Men are again like almost completely separated from the rest of the Marvel books. So it's like cycles, It goes back, and now it's back into we need to to do a separate thing. The X-Men books are a separate entity, and let's separate them from the Marvel universe. So that's happening again now.
Great. And there's lots of geometric shapes, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. There is. I have to say, I have enjoyed very much your second coming to Marvel. Fantastic Four was superb. You perfectly understood the characters, and the continuity you were doing was very successful. Did you want to continue after Secret Wars?
Well, yes, I did. I'm actually that little period at Marvel especially Fantastic Four, Scarlet Witch, and Nick Fury. I'm very proud of those books, and I'm not sad, and that's too strong a word, but I wish more people were aware of them because I think they stand up pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with Fantastic Four was that before Secret Wars, it was the only arc of Fantastic Four in some ridiculous length of time, 20 years or something, that Tom Brevoort hadn't edited. So it was kind of pushed to the side. And I actually, originally, what happened? Originally, Doctor Doom was going to be more of a presence at the end because he's Doctor Doom, and that was going to be my ending. And then they're like halfway through, they wouldn't, Secret Wars was somewhat secret, even in its planning, even though I was going to the summit, the Marvel summits at the time in New York. Sorry, my voice. I need a little bit more coffee.
Drink. We are in no rush, so.
But so because of the, there's a moment where I was told I couldn't use Doctor Doom, but I thought managed to quite artfully, where he's looking at planets and he's gotten this information from Valera, imply that part of what he was doing in my book was setting up Secret Wars. But that was just because I wanted a nice fluid transition. I didn't have to do that. But it was sort of like, I think because Tom wasn't involved, and I found out, I sort of began to realize later that if Tom isn't involved, things don't count in the Marvel universe. They're kind of off on their own to live or die by their own strengths. So it lived or died by its own strengths, but I got to, work. I loved working on those characters. I was amazed. I actually think I did a pretty good job of capturing their personalities and everything else. And it wasn't like I even tried. I think they're so perfectly defined by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and by some of their more noteworthy successors that followed on and did good work. And there's been good work on that book forever. If you look at it, it has its rough patches, but it always comes back with some really solid stuff. But I did want to do something that felt that went back to its roots a little bit. I felt that the Hickman stuff was so epic, but also had so much going on and was not confusing. That's not the right word, but it was very complicated. I wanted something clean, simple, that went through and I wanted to try and involve every character that had been in, not every character, but like a lot of characters that have been in Marvel. All the these humans appear. Puppet Master, Alyssa, whatever her name is, appears. So anyway, that and I also got to write more Jim Hammond, the original Human Torch, who I really enjoyed writing the Avengers, and he might be my favorite Marvel character, although I feel like no one writes him very well apart from me. And then so thank you for that. And what was the rest of it? Scarlet Witch. What was that?
We'll get there. You're jumping.
Oh no, I thought.
No, that's in the end. We were in Fantastic Four, but he has another question later. But let me go in order here. Roberto Ruiz Garcia. Hey, James, long-time fan here. What are your thoughts on digital comic platforms such as Webtoon?
What are my thoughts on it really? I'm not sure really, because I think that for some people, the computer is such a, like it's like having their heart or their lungs removed to take away their computer. So I see that it's another means of delivering comic book material to people who want to read it on the when they're commuting to work, or they just feel more comfortable seeing it on the computer. I don't see it that much of a difference. I mean, I have loved all of the stuff that Brian K. Vaughan and Marcus Martin. By the way, another story I'm very proud of at Marvel was that Captain America story I did with Marcus Martin many years ago, the Golden Age Captain. I love that story. But he's consistently great. That stuff with Brian K. Vaughan on Panel Syndicate, as well as the new thing that he's doing with Brubaker. All of that to me is fun. I mean, every time I get an email from Panel, because you subscribe, and they say, "Oh, there's a new issue of this or that," and you're like, "Oh, great!" And you get it. You pay, whatever money you think you deserve to pay. That's exciting to me, almost more than going to the comic book store, because it feels almost like when you go to back in the day, I don't know if this was how you read comics, David, but for me, and I guess for Americans too, before comic book stores, you would if you were a fan of comics, you would go to the local news agents in England or drugstore in
Yeah,
America.
newsstands, kiosks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you'd be like, and it would be the same titles and not the same titles, the same issues.
Yeah.
I've read that, or I'm not interested in that. And then you go.
Yeah, and you were always miss an issue, and you would never get it from the start. Like whatever was there was the stuff you could get.
And then one day you'd arrive on a Thursday, and then suddenly there'd be all new titles. You'd be, and you'd be buying them all. That's me pulling comics out of the rack,
yes.
By the way. And it isn't quite as huge an experience, but getting that email and there's a new issue or something, yeah, it's fun. One of the things I will say, sorry, I'm good at who asked this?
Roberto Ruiz Garcia.
Ruiz is one of the things about it though is that that I liked about how Marcus Martin does it at least is he does it for the width of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very immersive experience. And I find that reading stuff on Comixology can be a little bit less of that experience because page, and then you have a double page, you have to resize it, and there's this constant adjustment.
Yeah.
So I think when you do comic books for the computer, you have to bear that in mind to make that experience as fluid as possible for the reader. So there are a few little changes in storytelling discipline that you have to think about. But apart from that, I think it's the future, and I think that I don't know. I think comic books or graphic novels at least will always be published, but it's a valid way to get it across. And if people are reading comics in one medium or another, at least they're reading comics.
Absolutely, and also there's a part of it. When I get on my iPhone or on my iPad, I get the notification of that series that you're reading on Webtoon, as you said, has a new chapter, and they are weekly. You just go, oh my god, and you read it, and the scrolling, the vertical scrolling, and how they adapt to the format. For me, it's always fascinating to see that because it's mostly new generation doing Webtoon, and you see how they're trying to push the boundaries or to tell stories in a different way that is more adapted. What my daughter, a 7-year-old daughter, is going to read. To not what the way we've always read on paper. They're thinking, that generation has, as I said about my daughter, she was born with an iPad in her hand. They were born with the tablets already. So that's the way it is natural for them. It's not the book, it's the scrolling. Yeah. So seeing how that new younger guys try to change and adapt, it's got to be fascinating also for you as a creator, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, it is. Hopefully, you'll see me do some web stuff at some point. I wouldn't mind. I'd actually like to do it to experience the change in discipline. No one's really reached out to me seriously about it. So, if anyone's watching this that has a web thing, bear me in mind.
Yeah, let me send an email to Marcos when we're done here. Like, hello.
Marcos. Oh, I'd love to.
Marcos, watch this video with James. I think you will find something interesting. Okay.
I also very much enjoyed. He's a little bit more of a peppery personality, I think. Although I've not met him personally, but Javier Pulido as well. Yes. I did a Scarlet Witch with him, and is that all I did? No, I did the Shade. I did 3 issues of the Shade with him. Yeah. I loved working with him very much.
Javier is doing I've seen the pages of he's doing Ninjak for Valiant.
Oh no!
I saw the pages, and they literally let him, do whatever you want with the art. Be full Javier Pulido, and it's so much fun. When you let Javier just, go nuts, it's so much fun.
Oh, I will check that out. I suspect that's the only Pulido you get nowadays. Is you just let him do what he wants. You can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. With Javier doing something else, I've always thought it doesn't work. He's the kind of artist that he needs. Let me do my thing. If you're hiring, is to do my thing. If you don't, it's not going to work. As it should be in every case, let's be honest. But, let's not say that because editors could hear it. Tito James says, hello, James. Airboy is so cathartic to read as a comic writer. In your opinion, what makes good writing and what makes a successful comic writer? You guys are not making easy questions at all, just so you know.
No, yeah, I'm just thinking. Well, I mean, it's not what makes a good writer. I mean, I do think that writers are born and not made.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you have to have that thing that where you can write, where you can tell a story, and you can do courses to improve that. But I don't think you can learn to be a writer.
Mm-hmm.
But assuming that you have that a talent, and obviously, many people do. There's thousands and thousands of great writers out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that with comics, it's finding that balance between a plot and a heart.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some writers who concentrate too much on the plot, and there are some writers who get so caught up in the kind of soap opera of it all that you lose. You cut that the forward momentum of the story can get lost.
Yeah.
So I think being able to combine those two is very important.
Yes.
And then still in comics there is a very specific language in terms of panel by panel progression and the flow from the top left to the bottom right, turn the page moments, and all those things that you learn, and how many not organically, instinctively, how many words work in a panel in terms of what you've described, and all of that stuff is stuff you pick up along the way. But if you are willing to learn it and you're willing to take the time, I mean, that's the stuff you need to learn to be a good comic book writer. But if you are naturally a good writer, I think that stuff is easy to teach yourself, or to learn from. I mean, whatever you think about his politics and his wacky ways nowadays, Frank Miller understands panel by panel progression. You just study his storytelling, not necessarily his stories. I was lucky enough to work with Archie Goodwin for many years, and that taught me a great deal. And actually, when I was doing Grendel Tales, which came out later, but I actually wrote it. It was one of the first things I wrote after London's Dark, and then it was put on hold until Comico went out of business, and there was a legal thing, and it eventually went to Dark Horse. But Dinah Schutz is a wonderful, wonderful editor. Taught me so much. So if you're lucky enough to get like someone like that to squire you and help you to begin to understand storytelling, then that obviously is good. But if you're smart and creative, you can pick it up. But that's what I would say makes a good comic book writer is the innate ability to tell a story, and then just taking a little bit of time to look at the language of storytelling. So forward momentum of story and good character, heart, and try and come up with something original. That too. Don't just fall back on Magneto, Darkseid, and the same stuff.
Yeah, I remember when I was writing, when I was going to write a Batman Black and White for DC, Mark Chiarello asked me to, and I was like, any advice? I've written like a couple comics in my life, and you're asking me to write a Batman Black and White story, so, any advice? And the answer was, don't be precious. Don't be precious about anything. Just, if you have to let go, let go. It's going to be better for your story. If you're precious with anything, it's probably not going to work.
Yes, that's right.
And that moment was like, I have never thought about it that way. But the moment I did, reading the plot, because that was after I sent my original, idea for the 8 pages, I was like, that's true. I am trying to hang on into an original concept when I know that it doesn't work. So I guess that's being able to let go, even if it's something that you care a lot about at the beginning of the idea. It's needed to succeed as a writer, right? To be able to say, it doesn't work, just change it, just kill it.
Yes. So that's the answer.
And what makes a successful, and the other part of the question was, and what makes a successful comic book writer? Because the first one was, what makes good writing?
I think I answered that a little bit, didn't I?
I think so. Yes. Hello, everyone. Hello, Pedro. And now the question about Scarlet Witch we wanted to get to from Felipe. Scarlet Witch has been a great comic book where every issue, which every number is important. It was the cancellation of that book was a shame. Wanda and her world of magic has been convincing and realistic within fantasy. And then he says, Leave It to Chance was a special comic book with Paul Smith that really enjoyed your imagination and the world you have created. It was so imaginative. What did you want to achieve?
Well, what I wanted to achieve at the time was a book for all ages. And again, what I mean by that is something that you could enjoy as an adult, and then also as a kid, and you know, often in comics, and yes, I admit, you know, there's Miss Marvel and Squirrel Girl and some of the stuff like that, but a lot of it you either have to dumb yourself down to read it, or it's too mature. So I really wanted something that was for all ages, which I think we achieved. And it's interesting that the inspiration for it, going back to Frank Miller, I may have said this before, but back in the day when I was coming up with the idea, there was a comic called Miss Tree that Max Allan Collins was writing. And in the first 4 issues, he got Frank Miller to do double-page images of key characters from detective fiction. So there was one of Philip Marlowe, there was one of Sam Spade, or Content Op, one of those, and there was one of Nancy Drew. And as a guy, I had never read a Nancy Drew book, but I always I had this vision of them being light and twee and not the kind of stuff I would read. But the image that he did was her by a grave, shining a light, and it was very Frank Miller-y. And that sort of somehow or other, that sparked. I told him this because he actually congratulated me on Leave It to Chance when I saw him many years ago when I met him at a con. And I said, well, you were part of the inspiration for it with this one image. So but what I wanted to do was an all ages book that was fun and it was just, at the time that me and Paul were doing it was so much fun to work on it. I mean, it's a shame that we're not doing more. But anyway, so yeah, that's what I wanted.
Yeah, let's hope it'll happen again with him or somebody else. That book, I've said this before and I will say it again. That book deserves to come back, one way or the other. You know, it deserves to come back. So I'll fight for it. So, Felipe Burrell, I discovered the Netflix series Extraordinary You. Was a webtoon series, even though it was using comic ideas and devices to drive the plot forward. I didn't know that. I didn't know there was anything that was bought from webtoon that was already on Netflix. So that's a good thing.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Which is your vision as British writers of USA comic book of the comic book industry? You have been an important part of it, and you have lived so many different periods of it. What do you think is the future of the industry?
Well, that's a bit of that's a few questions in one in a little bit.
Yes, it is.
As a British writer of the US comic industry, well, it's becoming, in terms of like creators and all of that, it's becoming less of I mean, yes, they're published in the US comic book industry, but now with the internet and everything else, writers and artists from all over the world can write for Marvel, DC, or Boom quite easily. I mean, I do remember the time, and I have no idea how much this cost them, but we would everything was FedExed, so if you were living in Spain or you were living in, Gary Frank lives in Italy. You just because of the time it would take to get your artwork to America, a lot of these people just never worked in America. All these South American artists that are now working for Marvel or DC or doing stuff for in the independents, and even Asia. So it's become more of an international industry in terms of its creators, which is just progress and how things are.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, the US comic book industry, I don't know if that question means Marvel or DC, or if it means everything. Because at the moment,
Let's
obviously,
just let's just take it as everything. Yeah, let's just take it as let's
so
talk
then,
about
so then
Genesis.
you have Marvel and DC, and they're now becoming more institutionalized because they're owned by Time Warner, and by Disney. And then you have Marvel, Boom, and some of the other Dark Horse is still in the running. You have these other publishers that are still doing interesting work. I mean, in that regard, I don't know that it's changed a great deal from before. I do. I mean, as an English, I mean, I'm glad that there are more British writers in US comics as well. They bring a certain individual flair to it. I think, coming from another country. What do you think of the future of the industry? I think the future. I don't know really. I mean, we talked a little bit about Marvel and DC, the fact that perhaps they weren't appealing to enough of a broader spectrum of people, that slowly it was sort of cannibalizing itself in terms of its readers aging, and not enough new readers coming in. I do think that like good stories will still be told, so you will get. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more like miniseries, and where characters are given 4 issues or a graphic novel, and it's more like an a European bande dessinée.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, basically, that's the long answer, honest answer. I really don't know what the future will be.
But I agree with you. I think the future is going to be that, whether we like it or not. I mean, the attention span of the reader has changed so much that by the end of the day, yes, Marvel and DC, of course, are going to keep doing their thing, which is and Valiant or whatever, their ongoing stuff. But then you have any other company, and they know the reader wants complete stories. So even if you divide it into volumes of the same character, or just do a finite story, the future is telling us to go in that direction, right? The people wants to read complete stories, know when they end, and then if they don't want to come back, you'll give them another story of the same character, right?
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, I feel probably I'll be involved in comics until I die. So hopefully, I'll be a part of that future. We'll see.
Of course you will be. Of course you don't doubt it. I'll fight for it again. And love from Howard, an honor, Mr. Robinson. From the beginning of the project, JSA, the Golden Age, did you want to work with those characters, or at the beginning you were working with more known characters?
No, I always wanted to do that story. I was lucky that Archie Goodwin was so receptive and made sure it happened. At the time that I wrote it, the characters had been sent off to Valhalla, if you remember, by Roy Thomas. They were in this sort of time loop fighting what was it, Norse gods or something. And then they came, and then just as I was doing it, they came back. Oh no, I take that back. Wait a minute. I don't remember now. I seem to feel that they had been sent off in a rather unspectacular way, and not one that they deserved. So what I wanted to do was sort of so I thought about doing like the end of the Golden Age in a way of, and giving them this epic send off. And at the time, I was very inspired by Frank Miller's Legends of the Dark Knight Returns and stuff like that, where it felt. I mean, I'm criticizing books being too mature, but I sort of did that myself. So I know there's a degree of hypocrisy in what I say. But I sort of wanted to do something that felt adult, but still captured that feel, that love for that nostalgia and that feel of love. And Paul, fell in love with the idea too, thankfully. And he added a flair that in that particular book, he tried to marry his own style, which is very clean, simple lines, with the slightly more feathered work of Alex Raymond. And I think did a pretty great job of reconciling those styles. So that was my intention at the time. No, so it was never me making the most of a bad situation where I was given these characters. It was a series I very much went after and pursued and spent a lot of time trying to get as right as I could.
Was your intention at the time when you were doing Golden Age or then Starman to become as you became for some, or JSA, of course, as you became for so many other people, like the man with all the knowledge about the golden age, and like the guru of that era and those
Guru.
characters. The guru, yeah.
No, well, not really. I mean, it sort of happened a little bit, but I mean, at the time, also remember this was before the internet. Like, I mean, there's so many. So it is. You're right. I have been in comics a long time, and I have been through a lot. And one of the things is that the computer has allowed research. It always amazes me, and I've done this. There have been certain artists, even that I've had to like find research for, and I'm like, how hard is it to get on Google Images and look at, Barcelona streets? How hard is that? But it's very hard for some people. But back in the day when I was researching like witchcraft and some of these books, even who were the Golden Age characters, like quality characters, all of them. I mean, it was hard to find the names of them, what their powers were, what they looked like. So that was something, and going out to research something, like I did that vigilante book, City Lights, Prairie Justice, with Tony Salmons. Getting the research of that meant a day of your life is going to the library, looking around, finding the books that you probably need, but they're not in stock at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to pull out a request. Then you go back and get the books. There was a whole procedure, and it took ages and ages. And now, Bugsy Siegel's house, click, 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 and you have it.
Yeah.
So that was a change, and so a lot of what I did into being the guru of the Golden Age wasn't so much intentional. It was just that I took the time to go out and things I didn't know, I found out.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just one of those things, and then other people stepped into the breach, and I'm just the guy now.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fine.
Yeah, I have an anecdote about what you just said about some people being unable to find to do research, because one of my artists, some time ago, he was asked to have Seattle in a couple pages, and he did Seattle, and I'm not gonna say who, if the writer of the editor. No, they just answered an email. Oh my God, that looks like the real Seattle. Has he never been here? And he's in Barcelona. How does he know? And the answer just wrote, I just went into Google Images and did some research and tried to find some, photos that look real, and did it. It's just doing research. It's not that big of a mystery.
No, it's not. It's not. In fact, for streets now, you can literally, like, if you can get like a few addresses in Seattle or somewhere, and you do Google Streets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's right there, and it's very easy to do.
You do a Street View. This is before Google Street View, but anyway, you could go into Google and just Google, the big needle or the street around, and there was of course pictures from tourists or whatever, whatever was MySpace or whatever it was called back in the day. Even 10, 15 years ago, you could find it. But now, as you just said, it's not even that. It's just getting into your phone, Google Street View. Oh, okay, that's the street. That's the full street. I'll just draw it, or even a SketchUp. Some artists that you can just go to SketchUp and you're going to have a 3D view of most of the big towns. So you just can grab it from there, put it in your screen and then draw all over it. So there's a million ways to do it, I guess. So
nice.
Different text minds. James just wanted to say I really appreciated your vision for Earth 2. I hope to see you return to comics soon.
Okay, well, thank you. I look forward to it too, and when I do, please support the books. I will say this about Image books, is when you, it's true of even Marvel or DC. I mean, and I understand it because comics are not cheap anymore. They're not 15 cents or 25 cents. They're like, many dollars. But if you trade weight for books, you are potentially signaling their demise, because the train that's running, that keeping that book being written, and there's royalties come in that for the artists are important, because then they can live and work. If you trade weight, you can kill a book before it's even done.
Yeah.
So with my books, if you could please buy the floppies, please, I would appreciate it.
Yes. people, if you wait for the trade, many times books die before you get to the trade. So please buy the floppies. Then, if you buy the trades, that's fine. If you want to give away the floppies when you got the trade, so more people knows the book, we love you for it.
That's great.
First,
Yes.
buy the fucking floppies because we want the books to survive until they get to the trade. That's an important.
Yes.
Look from Howard asked you, did you imagine when you started Starman that it could be so complete and rich in details?
I hoped it would, and I had ideas all the way through to the end, but at the same time, you never know what the future holds. I mean, originally when I started Starman, and the last series had such a people hadn't liked that character and hadn't sort of caught the public's attention. Even though, ironically, now by today's standards, the book would be a runaway hit in terms of its sales because sales are less than they were. But Mike Carlin was very dubious about the series, and the way that the books were done at the time, you had to have the three main group editors at DC all to approve a project. So that was Denny O'Neil, Mike Carlin, and Archie Goodwin. All had to be on the same page. So at the time, Mike Carlin was like, I like James's work. I kind of trust it, but I would just do it as a mini series. So I wrote the first 4 issues. Originally, and also the whole thing was 0 hour, and that was done. And that was a thing that was kind of backdoored in.
Yeah,
Starman was already being written, and the art was being done when the whole concept of 0 hour came up. So, Mike Carlin had said just do 4 issues. So that is why at the end of the first arc, Sins of the Father, it ends with a cliffhanger with Will Payton alive in space and Mikael Thomas, the alien Starman, in the Freak Show. That was me going, I'm going to leave them with such a cliffhanger that they'll want to continue the book. That was calculated. But it did put me on a path where I had to follow through on all those characters. So that was part of the detail that I guess I set for myself.
Yeah.
So what happened was, as the book was being done, issues 2 and 3, it hadn't been published yet or solicited yet. But Mike Carlin saw what we were doing, and he was like, you know what, I was being silly. Why don't we just do this as an ongoing? And it became an ongoing by the time it was published. So I intended to try and do something that, in my own way, was kind of like my Sandman, like Neil with Sandman, with the richness of the detail and the characters and all of the plot points kind of tying up and coming back on themselves. And I think I did that. And I was glad I did 80 issues, and it was a nice round amount. But I think it was Neil that said, because he was asked something I think probably similar to this question about Sandman, that you kind of plan about half of it and the rest kind of falls into place without you even trying. It just happens. And that was true with definitely with Starman, that a lot of it was planned and a lot of it I was building for certain key moments in the series that went on. But some of it was definitely, that's a happy accident. I'll pretend I intended that from the beginning, So that's what happened, and ultimately, it ended the way it was supposed to end, and I'm very happy with how it ended.
How much did you have to fight Jack and the other characters? I mean, was there any times when you were, okay, this is the path I want to follow, and then your characters started to fight you back, saying, no, that's not me. I've grown in a different way. That's not what I could do. That's not who I am. Change it?
Well, the one that did was the Shade, who I intended to be a lot more amoral than there's. I mean, some of this stuff is I've said before in interviews, and I'll probably be saying that in that magazine interview that's coming up. But there was a book that I loved. I haven't read it in years. I should probably reread it and see if I still love it. Called Gloriana by Michael Moorcock. And it's sort of an alternate world where the Elizabethan Empire still exists, and there's a queen and everything. So there's this character in it who ends up sort of being somewhat heroic, but he's so amoral. He does some terrible things, but he does just enough good things, or things that are appealing, that you can't help but like him, even though he can be kind of awful. And that was how I imagined the Shade originally. And slowly his reformation, or him finding his humanity again, became something that came out of me writing him that I didn't expect to do. So that was one example. Jack, I kind of known Jack so well that he never surprised me. The one thing that did happen was there was a period where I was getting a little bit burned out with comics, and it was definitely when I there was personal stuff going on. It was when I stopped. I did those first. I kind of got DC to reintroduce the Justice Society, the JSA book. I did those first issues, and then I just couldn't do it much more. So I got Jeff Johns on it, which you're welcome to the comic book world. But this was around about when Archie Goodwin died, and I sent Jack off into space, and Tony Harris. That was his point to leave the book. And I thought to myself, should I just end the book now where he goes up into space and have someone else pick it up, or have the book end and the readers can write their own ending to that in their mind? And Jack wouldn't let me do it. He kept nagging me that I had to finish the series, and so I kept on. And luckily at the time, David Goyer wrote some issues with me, which definitely helped to re-energize me and set me. And then Peter Snayberg came on, and he was sort of the perfect guy to do the ending of that Grand King Null. Great, wonderful artist who I'd love to work with again. It's hard because he lives so far away. So there, yes.
So by the end of the day, who won? The character telling you to.
Well, at the end of the day,
Jack, or let me ask you in another different way. How much of Jack was you telling you to finish, or was it really Jack telling you have to?
It was just me, probably me. The stories I wanted to tell I hadn't told, and I have a bit of a conscience. I get very, I take things very personally. So it was probably me, but it's more poetic to say that Jack was talking to me.
Yeah, I love the poetic part. That's better. Philip Ebrel, would James work for 2000 AD? And if so, which character would he like to do, or something new?
Well, for a long time I had never worked for 2000 AD, and it was a little bit of it irked me. I did do one story in a special issue, a Rogue Trooper story. And it was very nice that on Twitter, Dave Gibbons actually said how much he enjoyed the story, which was nice. He didn't have to say that. I guess I would love to do something again, but it appealed. The thing about that sort of thing is that if I had an original idea, I'd want to do it I'd want to own it, and you do kind of give that up. It's just like working for Marvel or DC.
Yeah.
So if I did something else for DC from Marvel for 2000 AD, it would be probably one of their characters, or something where I didn't mind giving it away within the world, like a new character for the Judge Dredd world or something like that.
Yeah.
That would I would maybe do that for some fun, but I mean it isn't a very high paying gig, so it's something I have to kind of want to do for the love of it.
Yeah. Oh, one question: is there, when you work for hire as compared to create your own, is there a different set of muscles that you use as a writer, or is the same one just used in a different way?
No, it's the same. There is I can't describe it exactly, because it isn't like you have this. There is a real change, but there is a lightness, an airiness working on your own material. There isn't there when you write for Marvel or DC. There's kind of you feel like a yoke on you a little bit. This, to use the metaphor with oxen, pulling a plow. There was a little bit of a constraint that it might be in my own head. I mean, I guess I'm only talking for me because I have no idea how other writers feel. But when you write your own stuff, there is this freedom that obviously would exist because it's your own stuff, but it feels different. It feels lighter and easier to get stuff out onto the page, I find.
And there's also a part, other writers have just defined that, what you said, talking about safety nets. They say when there's an accelerating part of the career own process, which is when you are Marvel DC, you always know, there's tropes and there's, parts of it or all the stories that you can, just go for if you feel you don't have an idea for an issue. It's like, okay, they have such a rich story, you can always go back and touch on something else. But when it's your stuff, your own world, like there's nothing. There's no safety net. It's always going to be on you. So it's exhilarating, but at the same time, it's a lot more panic-inducing, could be.
Well, yes, but the other thing, yeah, that's very true. But the other thing that I'm thinking about, and I'm not going to name names, but I've had some wonderful experiences with editors.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also had some pretty terrible experiences with editors where books that I wanted to be a certain thing end up being something completely different. And sometimes that's the direction that Marvel or DC are going in, and you just have to kind of roll with the punch.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's because the editor's an idiot, and I've literally had dealt with that as well. So that's the other thing that can happen with working for the mainstream, is that your ideas get cut off at the knees because of things completely out of your control. Absolutely. And that really kind of taints the process and makes you feel kind of a bit beaten up, which doesn't really exist. As you say, the book lives or dies by your own hand, by your own creativity, but that freedom and knowing that it is just you is pretty fantastic, actually.
Absolutely. Francisco Sanchez says, hello, how did you have the idea to create Leave It to Chance? You already answered that, but that's a part of the question that we didn't talk. Did you get a call from Homage Studios? Was it a good collaboration? How did it was, how it was in terms of the company you picked to do the work with?
Well, it was very well at the time. I had done WildC.A.T.S, with Travis Torres. I took over from Jim Lee, so I was going down. Oh, what's that? Is that a page of Travis?
It's a page from your first issue.
Ah, there we go. Is it?
Yeah, it's issue. It was supposed to be issue 14, but they did the Travis Torres, the Eric Larson issue, so it became issue 15.
Okay.
That's your first, right?
Yeah, 15 and 16. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're my first two. So I was, and then I was doing, WildC.A.T.S. WildC.A.T.S Year One, or I was doing miniseries. I was doing all sorts of stuff. I did the Captain America. I took over for Jeff Loeb and Rob Liefeld when his Captain America, no one liked it, so they gave it to Jim Lee to finish the 12 issues. So I had quite a relationship at the time. I would go down to La Jolla quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So when they were doing Homage, I don't know how or when Paul Smith got involved. Whether I don't remember if I had the idea started with me, and then I involved Paul, and it sort of became our idea. But I don't remember if that happened before Homage came and asked, and it was a happy accident, or if Homage came first and then I came up with the idea. I don't remember. Mm-hmm. But they were looking for, it was me, it was Strangers in Paradise, and it was Astro City.
Yeah,
and it was a fantastic deal. It was a wonderful creator deal. And
wasn't Bone a part of it too? It was Bone, Strangers in Paradise, Leave It to Chance, and Strange.
I think Bone was going to be part of it.
Uh-huh.
And then what happened was obviously that Jim Lee went to DC, and Paul Levitz didn't want to honor the Homage contracts because I think they would have set a precedent, or I don't know why, but he would not do it. So you had to either sign these new shitty contracts, which Kurt Busiek, I presume, did, or walk away, which Terry Moore did, and ultimately we did.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we went to Image, and we did issue 13, and then after that things fell apart with me and Paul in terms of the book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But
So
go on.
no, no,
What?
no. Please go. Please go.
Oh well, I was just going to say, what was the question again?
I know it was. How was it to the collaboration with Homage?
Oh well, I mean, it was so easy, and it was such an easy. I forget who was it Jonathan Lehman was the I think
John
Jonathan Lehman, the
John Layman.
editor.
Yeah. Yeah. John
He
Layman.
was he was great, a great editor too. I mean, it just was a fun, great time.
Mm-hmm.
The coloring, Jeremy Cox. It was just a great time to work on the book and have that level of quality.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Felipe Ebrel says another great book, The Vigilante with Tony Salmons. And Felipe Gonzalez asks, what do you think about your model to tell stories, past, feelings, legacy, respect, and the effect you had on a generation of writers? For me, so many writers are very influenced by your way of writing.
Well, that's very nice to hear. I never thought about it. I mean, I honestly, David, part of me is like, I feel I want to do my books, but I don't feel like I'm particularly influential. I mean, when I think of writers who are influential, I think of Alan Moore and Grant Morrison and Neil Gaiman, and from the English bunch, and then
Mm-hmm.
have Frank Miller, and even people kind of forget their work. But when I was growing up, it was somewhat influential in terms of what they were trying to do. Like Howard Chaykin, when he did Black Hawk, when he did American Flag, Times Square, and Matt Wagner when he was doing Grendel and Mage, well, he's still doing,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. And then the Hernandez brothers doing Love and Rockets and stuff like that. I mean, that's the stuff to me that are people that are influential. I don't feel I've really done that, so it's nice to hear someone feel that I have influenced other writers. I
Mm-hmm.
would be curious to know how I influenced them, quite frankly. But that's great.
Don't you feel I still feel your influence on Jeff Jones.
I don't know if he does. But he
Let me text him.
yeah. No. Well, that's nice. I mean, he has said to many times at panels that the most influential book he ever had in terms of like wanting to be a writer was The Golden Age. So I guess I do. I mean, we do talk a lot about when we're together about his comics. I mean, we're talking about Doomsday Clock as he was sort of working on it, and so I do feel that maybe that's true. Maybe I still influence him a little bit. We'll see. But nice to hear.
Yeah, I remember when I had him here when we were talking about Doomsday Clock and how much he liked that. I literally told him, but I don't think this is a book about Watchmen. I think it's a book about Superman. And he was telling me, yeah, and I would love for people to realize that a lot more than they have. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I thought it was really obvious. It was your love letter, yours and Guy's love letter to Superman from the get-go.
Yeah.
Do you agree on that?
Yeah, I do very much. Yeah.
Okay, so when you were called to do, let me see the name. I got Francisco Sanchez. When you were called to do Wildcats after Brandon Choi and Jim Lee, what did you plan? What did you have in mind to do to make the book different to the typical Image Comics book of that era?
Well, I guess what I tried to do, there were Image books at the time had it was all big art, and the story kind of felt like almost secondary to the art. And I guess what I wanted to do was not compromise that. Always try and keep that art aspect big, and obviously Travis Charest, you gotta do that, but also just inject a little bit more nuance and personality into the characters. There was the reason I needed a little bit of time to get a handle on them, which is why the first two issues really are a Ben Santini comic with the Wildcats as sort of somewhat secondary to the main story. It was so that I could bring in that personality that I knew because I was inventing that character, and at the same time start to get a feel for the other characters around him. And I don't know why, but when I was looking at the original Wildcats, there was this one image where Imp is blowing out this guy's knee with a gun, and they're the good guys. And I was like, wow, that's pretty mean. Like, you crippled this guy. You know, and I'm sure that Jim Lee just didn't give it a second thought. It was just an image and a moment in an action scene. But for some reason, it really stayed with me. So that's what gave me the idea of Ben Santini and his augmented knee and his love of old movies, which definitely comes from me personally. So so that was it. So really, it was just to try and tell the kind of comics that I tell or the stories I write, whilst not taking it in so far away from the Wildcats that had come before that it was unrecognizable.
Yes, Francisco asked also, was it Jim Lee who asked you to change the tone and the style of the series, or was it just yourself? And also, why was your time on the book so short?
Well, no, he didn't. Jim Lee actually was. I mean, he's a very cool guy, and he just gave me freedom to do what I want, and I had the instincts to not make it too different. But you know, he really did hand me the keys to the kingdom. I don't remember why my time on the book was so short, because I was doing other stuff too. I don't remember. Honestly, things, you know, it depends. What 1 minute you want lots of work, next minute you don't. I mean, I have always tried my best not to overfill my writing slate, because I feel that does compromise the quality, or it can. So it could have been that. I really don't remember. I know that I have nothing but fond memories of working for Wildcats, and if I could go back in time, I would have stayed on the book longer. Although Alan more to go for me, so it's not like it wasn't like it was a huge downturn for the book.
Yeah, it wasn't Jim calling you on the phone and saying, "Hey, Alan Moore wants to write the book. You gotta leave."
I don't remember that. No, I don't think so. No.
Nah, I was joking.
No, but I mean that could have happened. But no, in this instance, it that wasn't it. No.
Greg McKean says, "How did you end up working with Darwin Cook on Shade issue 4, and what was that relationship like?" And then he makes a joke about, also, I'm surprised how much you sound like a serious James Acaster.
Who is James?
I have no idea, to be honest.
All right. Well,
Greg McKean, please clarify. I hope he's not a porn actor.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm fine with that, but I just don't know who that is. If you want to send in another little question, a little thing, what is your name? Greg McKean, so that we know who that is. I would love to know who that is and what his voice is like. What was the first part of the question again? Wait a minute. Oh, Darwin Cook, the Shade. So I don't quite remember how I met Darwin, but he was very. He said that, like, the New Frontier was sort of like a sequel to the Golden Age, and I in terms of its feel and in terms of what he was trying to accomplish, and I was very, very flattered by that. New Frontier obviously is a masterpiece, and we had talked about working together on a few things, and we actually this is because, you know, DC at the time just did not give a fuck about. I mean, at times they just don't care about creators' feelings or anything. We had written. I was paid. We were written. I wrote a 3-part backup with the Vigilante that was going to be in the back of All-Star Western or whatever, the Jonah Hex book.
Yeah.
And so I wrote it, and Darwin loved it. I mean, it was for Darwin, and Darwin was beginning to work on it, and then they said, "Oh, we're not going to do that now," and it just never got made. So we were always wanting to work together, I was very fortunate when I met him. There was a double-page spread that got cut from the first issue of New Frontier of Ted Grant, knocking someone out in the ring. That I have. He gave it to me just when we met as a gift. Very nice. So with 4, I was just trying to. It was a chance for me to work with him. I definitely had thoughts on who the artists were for the entire Shade series. It was in my mind that is like the final arc of Starman. Really, it continues on with in so many ways, for me anyway. So it was just a story that suited him. We had fun doing it. He always has his moments of things he has to do. He's very much not bossy. That's too strong a word. He believes in the things he believes in. So when I originally did it, the Golden Age character that was going to be helping the Shade was going to be Airwave.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, James, I can't do this. I can't do a character that roller skates on top of telegraph wires and has a parrot. It's too. So he says, what about the Vigilante? He was a fan of City Lights, Prairie Justice, the Tony Salmon's collaboration. What about the Vigilante? And I was like, okay, let's do that. So we changed that, and also Madame Fatal. Was that Madame Fatal? Yes, who was an old lady in the original Golden Age. He decided he was going to do something that was a little bit more like Eric Stanton, like sex her up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously you find out at the end that it's a man, just because he thought that was funnier or more or cooler. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no argument with either of those. It was just a fun collaboration. I miss Darwin. He was always fun to talk with. He'd call me up out of the blue. He was a big fan of Airboy, and he'd call me out of the blue and tell me how much he liked it. It was just a very nice collaboration, and I'm very happy to have gotten to have it.
You just mentioned Airboy, and it's the second time it's mentioned here. I hadn't asked you about that book. How, for me as a reader, it read as cathartic. As you were, a lot of demons were going out in that book. Was it that real? Or is just my perception?
Sorry, what's that? Was it what or your perception?
I was saying it looked like a cathartic book, but also it read for me that you were through that book exorcising some demons. Is that just my perception, or it was really there?
No, it's really there. I mean, obviously I wasn't meeting Airboy, but a lot of that bad behavior is stuff I was doing or had done, and I was trying to clean my act up. I just kind of got to a place. I moved to San Francisco. I was just not in a very good place in any way, and I was sort of destroying myself a little bit. And actually, the amount of work I was doing for Marvel DC that was kind of getting hacked up at the knees, as we talked about, was just hard for me to be excited about comics. I will say that's why I liked Fantastic Four and Scarlet Witch. It felt rejuvenating. But Earth 2, what a nightmare. So I was just doing all the drugs and the drinking and stuff like that, and so doing this story that was somewhat autobiographical, at least in terms of my feelings and my spirit, if not in terms of the adventure, was definitely exercising demons. I will say that, and finding someone like Greg Hinkle who was willing to go along for the ride and be in it. But was one of the things that a big inspiration. There's a book by Chester Brown called Paying for It, about his experience with prostitutes, and I found that it was so honest and presented it in a way that it was very hard to be judgmental, to take a moral high ground. It was so him opening up his heart that you just had to go with it and go on his journey. And I was trying to sort of do that while at the same time do this crazy story, just to make it something more than just an artist in San Francisco doing drugs and doing bad behavior.
Yeah, I you gotta say that for me that book's a masterpiece. I remember
Thank
I
you.
I read it not that long after we last saw you in person, Paloma and myself in San Francisco. I don't think it was that long in terms of the time, and I was like, oh my god, and in every level I thought that's when I thought about the catharsis of it, but also I thought this is a masterpiece, and it's still I still think that
Thank
and
you.
and would you ever return to that character? It was like that's there. Those demons were exorcised. I'm in another part of my life.
Well, we talked about definitely talked about that, but really the story's told. I mean, the one thing that Greg was frustrated, not in a terrible way, just Greg would have loved to have incorporated the heap into the
Mm,
story,
mm-hmm,
and we even talked about doing a little heap story in the collection where you kind of see some of the events of the comic from his perspective. He's in the background and you don't
mm-hmm,
realize it, but which would have been hilarious and fun, but there was sort of no real point to it. So
mm-hmm,
it is what it is, and I think it's best. That's the other thing I found is, like, I did a series called The Witching Hour years ago, which in hindsight now I reread it recently and it's very dated. It's very much a young writer trying to be edgy, and it was Vertigo. I think it was Vertigo. It wasn't just DC, but
Vertigo.
it was very uh, but it was popular enough at the time that I did a second series set during the French Revolution, which is a period of time that fascinates me.
Mm-hmm,
And it wasn't as good. And I've learned often that if you do something really well, like a magician, do not do the same trick twice, because the first trick time they'll enjoy it, and the second time they'll be looking for how you did it.
mm-hmm,
So with Airboy, I think I did the magic, and I think I should just leave it
mm-hmm.
like that.
Don't come back for a sequel when the original story is good enough on its own and it doesn't need it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Mm-hmm,
I mean, if you look at like old films in MGM and Warner Brothers, yes, they had the Thin Man and some of these sort of detective characters that were B movies,
mm-hmm,
but mainly if you had a writer, not a writer, an actor and an actress that had chemistry and they did a great story, you'd write another film for those guys to hopefully have the same chemistry.
yep.
You wouldn't do a sequel to this film or that film.
Yeah, you
So
couldn't do a sequel. You could use Cary Grant and Catherine Hepburn together in another movie,
exactly,
or you could do
yeah,
Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, but you couldn't
yeah,
do a sequel for the same movie. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Although having Humphrey Bogart do another Philip Marlowe movie would not be the worst thing in the world,
Nope, I couldn't complain
unfortunately.
about that at all.
Yeah.
Javi Fernandez Barranco, the artist, says, "Hi, James. Just to say hi, I remember that my first DC work was with you. What an honor."
Well, I've been seeing Javi's work since then. I mean, his work was wonderful then. This is The Outsider, which was a bizarre spin-off from Flashpoint,
Mm-hmm.
because I think there was an intention there would be more done with the character, but I mean that it was like it exists. It might as well be an image book. There really is barely any link to it. There was really no link to the rest of what was going on in Flashpoint, and the character's never been used again. But sorry, it's early in the morning. I'm still
It's fine.
my coffee's reminding me that I drank it. His art then was wonderful. I loved working with him, and I've just seen his art get better and better and better. I believe he's doing the Spawn book now, a Spawn
Yep.
book.
Yep.
Um, and Todd McFarlane is very lucky man to have him working on it. And when Harvey's done with that, if he ever wants to work with me again, I would love that. I would be honored to work with Harvey again.
Javi, that's on the table.
Yeah, there you go. That's on the table.
Felipe González Hernández, how do you remember your run in Malibu as part of the writers' staff? It was difficult to create that universe and the rules.
Well, not for me, in that I was when I was approached to do it, I was torn because I was a new writer. I needed work, but I was also unsure at the time. I mean, now these things happen all the time, but like a new line of comic books. The money, I don't know where they got the money from, but I mean, they put some serious money into getting that off the ground. And the one thing that bothered me, Chris Ulm, who was the kind of the orchestrator of the whole thing, I don't know what his title was, if he was editor in chief or he had a different title, but he really was the guy that was orchestrating it. Or one of them. There was I'm terrible with names. There was one other guy, Dave, maybe. There was one other guy that was working on it too, and I feel bad that I'm not mentioning him as well. But I was very concerned that everything that they were doing felt a little bit like a comic I knew, like this. The Strangers was kind of like X-Men or the Avengers, or even Slime was a bit like Man Thing. Everything was like something, and I felt that starting a new line of books that owed so much to Marvel and DC was a little bit problematic. But I mean, that was what they were doing. So what I want to do is something that I hadn't seen before. So the idea of this private detective who basically wanted to do divorce work and simple stuff, and just because of his life and fate, he was dragged back into this world of ultras and all of that. I felt was fresh and new, and also, I lived at the time in a place called Sierra Madre, not the Sierra Madre from the Treasure of Sierra Madre, but there is a place just a little bit to the east of Pasadena. And I lived there, so I would go to Pasadena all the time. So I was basically able to put a lot of myself and my thoughts on America and just stuff. That felt very much me as well, a different side of me at that time. And then, the book was launched with Carly Hamner, who was, coming into his own, but even then was great. And it was a book that when I ended it on my own terms. I managed to, I think, end it well, 18 issues, and I enjoyed it. Do you remember your run? Was it difficult to create this universe? So the bigger universe, I didn't really get involved in that too much. I found that to be confusing, and I was worried that it was too much like Marvel or DC. So I just kept to my own book, and I think that's why it worked so well. I managed to kind of like pull it back and put it off to the side.
Did you have any ownership rights for that book, or it was just Malibu, and so now it's owned by Marvel?
Well, it's sort of yes and no is the answer to that. It's yes, it's owned by Malibu, so it is owned by Marvel, but it will never be republished. None of that stuff is, because the contract that goes along with that, which is still valid, was so in favor of the artist, of the writer, that I think if they published that stuff, it would there would be a what's the word? Precedent. There'd be a precedent that would open a can of worms in terms of creator ownership and how much you get and all of that stuff with the other stuff that Marvel owns. Marvel only bought the Ultraverse for market share.
Yeah.
They had no interest in the characters.
Yeah.
So they did a little crossover, and then it went into, comic book death or comic book limbo.
Limbo. Yeah. It wasn't like DC buying the Charlton characters or anything like that.
No.
With the intention to use it. It was just, I need to bury them. I need to get the market share. Right.
Yeah.
Let's be honest about it. That was the point.
Yeah.
Love from Howard is asking, well, you already answered the question, so feel free to say I already answered the question. Why didn't you continue doing JSA?
Well, like I say, I was going through personal stuff. I was getting divorced, my first divorce. I was just, there are some writers that can do a lot of work and just get. I have to kind of go with my creative instincts and my flow. So I was just burnt out at the time, and I mean, what that got you was Jeff Johns. Really, that was his big entry into DC. But so that's good. But part of me sometimes wonders if I'd stayed on the book, what I would have done. I just was burnt out at the time creatively and emotionally, and I needed a break. There isn't really a long answer for that one.
Say Greg McKeon says that James Acaster is a comedian. Okay, we'll have to find out.
I will Google him in a moment.
Francisco Sanchez, was it difficult for you to do the Fantastic Four in terms of it seems there was no way for you guys to get the book sales to grow?
Yeah, well, I felt that with Fantastic Four, as I sort of said before, it was like, okay, Tom's left. Let it just do its last run. They had plans for it to end and everything. So it was the bad of that. The thing with these books, like Fantastic Four, is if you do a big event and it's all Fantastic Four, then it gets the coverage. But when it's sort of off to the side, people read it, but it felt a little bit underappreciated. It still does. I think I'm actually quite proud of that series as a whole. I think it's pretty good. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to work with Leonard Kirk, who, I mean, he works constantly, but he's sort of like, I don't think he ever quite gets the credit he deserves in terms of his work ethic and his ability and everything else. He's a real joy to work with, that guy. So that was very lucky that I got to kind of, there was a few fill-ins. He did Mark Lanning, who's also a really great artist from England, did a lot of the fill-ins. He did a great job. And between them, I think they kept a consistency to the series as a whole that has helped it to feel like a real solid piece of work, which I'm very happy about. But in terms of making it to more than it was, that was sort of out of my hands. I just had to try and tell the best story I could.
We've been at this for 1 hour and 50 minutes, just so you know. So if you need to leave, just let me know.
Take care of, but I can talk for another 15 minutes or so. That's fine.
Okay, so let me ask you about process for a while. If I ask you in terms of music, for you, what comics are, compared in terms of comics storytelling, what is it for you? Is it rock and roll, jazz, or a symphony, bar opera?
Well, it depends. I mean, that's a story by story or scene by scene moment. I mean, sometimes it is a symphony, sometimes it's definitely rock and roll, and sometimes it's jazz. I mean, I don't know that I can honestly answer that, David. It just depends on how the scene feels or the story feels.
Just so you know, you're the first breed who doesn't answer none of that. It's punk.
Oh yeah, boy, it's punk too, but punk. Yeah, okay.
No. All joking aside, that's the answer I always expect when I ask this, because when they say one, and I always say, why not all of them?
Yeah. Well, that's how I feel. Why not all of them? Exactly. You can be Dave Vane in one moment and Tom Waits the next.
Yeah. When you work, do you need absolute silence, or you have music, or it depends on the part of the process? How does it work?
No, I need silence. I've always been like, oh, if I'll just play my film themes or my classical music or what have you when I'm writing. I definitely can't write with a singer with lyrics going on.
Yeah.
But no, I need silence. I can't even really work with music. It always interferes somehow.
And when does it really happen, the biggest part of the work for you as a writer? Because I was talking to Jason Aaron about this, and he says the most frustrating part of his life is that most of the work for him happens when he's just literally staring at the sky. He was telling me that's when the bulk of the work happens, and then when everybody thinks you're not working, so they get into the room and interrupt you, and they think that most of the work happens when you're typing. So is that the case for you too, or not?
Yes, very much so. I have never been able to. I'll say one thing that's different between me and Jeff. Jeff can just. I've got 5 minutes. All right, boom, 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 boom. I have to have the flow and the feel of it and everything else. And if I don't have that, I find it very hard to write stuff that I'm genuinely, I feel is good. So so much like Jason, yeah, it's the quiet times when I'm staring off and I'm not thinking that is when most of the work happens. Absolutely.
Hmm. Do you have, how many notebooks do you have around the house?
Oh, so many. I don't know. I mean, there's this one's right here. They're always around. I've
Hmm.
got probably 5 or 6 at the
And
moment.
do you have one in your near your bed for those moments when you wake up with an idea? I have to put it down because I forget in the morning.
Yes, I have one of those. There's always that one goes from the bedroom to the bathroom when I'm sitting on the toilet, and then
On the
back to the
throne,
bedroom.
as I always say, always have a notebook near the throne.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
And is there any idea, any project in comics or outside of comics that you've kept from yourself from doing? I mean, that you said, I'm not ready for this, but I know that sooner or later, before I die, before I retire, if you ever retire, which I don't think you will, but if you ever do that, this story, I'm going to tell it one way or the other, is going to be told.
Well, yes. One of the things that I'm wary about talking about but I'm working on my novel, on 2 novels
Hmm.
that I'm taking my time writing them, but I'm working on them, and that's taken me a long time to. And I have one more in mind, set during the French Revolution. Actually, bringing that up again. That so I think I have waited a long time to write prose, but I um that's the in answer to that. I've waited to write prose, and now I'm ready to do it, and I enjoy doing it quite a lot. So we'll see where that leads me in the future.
What's the part that you miss when you're working on movies, TV shows, or in prose, as you said, as compared to when you're working in comics? The part that you miss, and also the part that you don't miss.
I don't really miss anything because they're so different.
Hmm.
I mean, you would think that it's all storytelling and it's all the same, but the discipline, within the worlds of even TV and film, working on them separately, um, it they're so different. It's sort of like cooking or doing. No, that's a stupid metaphor, analogy. I don't really miss. There's nothing I miss. When I sit down to write prose or write a TV script or a comic script, you think that they would all be the same. It's still my hands on the keyboard, but it really isn't. They feel so different that I just enjoy the process for what it is.
Yeah, yeah. That's another part I wanted to touch, and I love that you answered that, because many people think are the same, and you have also the Hollywood types that they just think they're going to write whatever script spec, and that's going to be read by a producer, and that's going to become a movie or a TV show. And you are going to agree with me. I know that the moment you read page one of that, it's crap and it's not going to work as a comic, because they don't know the language. It's people think it's
Yeah.
the same language, but it's not at all, right?
No, it isn't. No, no. And the surprise was as I got into TV, I mean the surprise is that also, I mean, comics uh and film are different storytelling languages, even though they're both, a combination of words, the dialogue, and then the image.
Hmm.
Oh, hello. That's my wife.
Hello.
Hear me? That's Alison. There she goes. Um. What were we talking about? So with that said, I it's easy once you say that to somebody, they go, oh, okay, I get it. Comics are different than films in terms of
Hmm.
writing them and how they're conceived. But you would think, and I thought this, that TV is just kind of like a truncated version of films that's sort of broken up into little, with commercials. If it's a media,
Yeah.
if it's a the people that are putting the program out have commercials, then you have to allow for that in terms of your page count and where your breaks are. But apart from that, it's the same. But even that is different. The things you write, how you write it, how you structure it, it's different enough that each thing that I write feels different enough that I can enjoy it for itself.
And also, when you work in comics, you are, as we said before, with the artist, you are the producer, you are the writer, you are most of the roles that you can think of as a movie, in a movie or a TV show. You guys, as writer and creator, of course, with the editor, if there's one, you cover all the roles, right? So the level of control is absolutely different.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the film and TV, it's much more of a collaborative, even more of a collaborative process.
Mm-hmm.
If you are, you all right, buddy? My dog's coughing. Hang on. Wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You all right? Wait a minute. He's all right. He's all right. He's all right. There we go.
Come on, buddy. Let's go outside. Come on.
Oh,
You got it.
yeah. Come on, buddy. Go. Okay. Sorry, he's getting old
Don't
now.
worry,
So,
I have a dog. I know how it is.
yeah.
He can just start coughing, and 2 seconds later, he's vomiting here. So because he bit something, whatever he shouldn't. So I know the feeling. Don't worry about that.
So, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Now we're talking about the level of the level of collaboration, and thank you, Alison. I could say, for bringing you another coffee.
Oh yes. Well, no, that's tea now.
Okay, it works. It works.
Teas later.
No, so I was saying, that how much it changes in terms of the level of control you have in comics as compared to TV or movies, because it's much more, you were saying, a much more collaborative process when you're doing TV or movies, right? There's a lot more people involved, to say it.
Well, there is more people involved. I've said this before, that, and this was definitely something that was hammered home to me with like with comic book villains. It's not perfect, but it very much. It was me wrote it, me directed it, and then I was involved. Obviously, I was there with the editor, so that felt like my work, good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
But mainly with films, and this really was painfully apparent to me with Legal Extraordinary Gentlemen, where
I wasn't going to mention that one.
I will. The original script for that was fantastic, very different than what I mean. I can't even imagine. It's like someone writing Castaway
mm-hmm.
by Tom Hanks, and then when the film's finally made, it's The Lady Killers with Tom Hanks.
Mm-hmm.
It's like so different from what began and what ended, and that was producers, the director, 9/11 even affected it. So all of these things were factors. And I've said this about comics: is if you have an artist that you get on with, and you understand his work, and he understands your writing, and you have an editor that understands what you're doing and is supportive and pushes you forward, then then the comic book that you end up with is pretty much what you imagine going in.
Yeah.
And you can't really get that in films. There's always someone else's point of view and someone else's creative input. Yep. Things get changed. So yes, basically what you've just said, David, I'm agreeing with.
Okay. Greg McKeon says, who's the artist you were most astonished you got lucky enough to work with when you look back? Those are not easy questions, guys. I told you.
No, they're not. They're not easy. They're not easy questions. I mean, this is. I hate people that answer it this way, but like, there's so many. I mean, Darwin Cook, Tony Harris, Peter Snayberg, Paul Smith. I mean, I've been just lucky. Barry Windsor Smith, even though it was kind of a nightmare to work with him, the fact that I got to work with him is quite something.
It's a nightmare, but it's Barry fucking Smith. So
yeah. So like, I don't know. I guess Barry Smith, actually, as much as it was hard to work with. I mean, how many people get to work with Barry Smith? So that would be that.
How many people gets to talk to Barry Smith?
Yeah, well, I never talked to him. He was, but
you guys never had the chance to talk?
No, he was off. He never came to La Jolla or Homage or any of that. But I mean I mean, I'm just picking him because he just did that book Monster, so he's on my mind.
Yeah.
But I could pick, half a dozen or a dozen of the artists I've worked with, and I was lucky to work with them. I mean, Harvey. That good artists. Just having a good artist that does great work. It's such a joy.
You work with Carlos. You work with Carlos Pacheco too, right?
I work with Carlos Pacheco. I love his work, and I've always wanted to work with him. And he was such a delight to exchange emails with as well. But that Cable, originally that was going to be kind of me coming back to Cable and doing like my love letter to. It was going to be this fantastic series where he had to go through time and fix things to put things back to the way they were meant to be. But that led to, bittersweet moments. Like, remember that the Star Trek story where they go back in time and Joan Collins, they have to let Joan Collins die.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to have stuff like that in it. And it was going to be such an exciting thing. And then it got Axel Alonso, who when he wants to be hands-on with a project is so hands-on, it's a nightmare. So he decided that was going to be his thing, and it became a mess. And they only wanted him. They only had Carlos for 4 issues. That's the other thing that the big companies do often is they don't care about the finished book. They care about getting the book out. So, like remember they did that Captain America series years ago with Kevin Maguire, and then the last issue he was too slow, so they put someone else on. They as opposed to waiting that extra month so that the finite thing was a perfect Kevin Maguire Captain America book. So it irked me a little bit that the artist that came on and finished it, a great artist, nice artist, but it wasn't Carlos. I would have loved to have had him do all 5 issues. So it was a bittersweet thing that I finally got to work with Carlos, but it was just so stressful and just it was just not a very fun experience. I wish it had been.
Yeah,
but
I was mentioning
Carlos.
Yeah, I mentioned it because Carlos, talks fondly about working with you a lot.
Oh, he does.
He also mentioned it was bittersweet and not what you guys wanted to do, but at the same time he was like, but it was such an amazing experience working and talking to James, and he loves your writing and he loves you. So
that's wonderful.
That's why I wanted to mention it, because I know it was bittersweet, and I don't know if you knew how Carlos felt about working with you.
No,
so you know what, I want to put that on the table, so he loved it.
Wonderful. Well, tell him when he's free, I'd like to work with him too. Again, on something that we both we could share.
Yeah, he's working on the second. I don't know if you know this. He's working on the sequel to the second book of Aerosmith.
Oh, he is. That's good.
He's doing Aerosmith too.
I love the first one.
Yep. So I don't know what the plan is. And if I knew, I couldn't talk because he would kill me. But I don't know what the plan is for later. But now he's doing the second part of Aerosmith, and as you can imagine, he's so happy being able, after all these years, to come back to his character.
Yeah. Well, I loved Aerosmith. I feel that is sort of Kurt Busiek's. Obviously he has Astro City, which is a great book, but it's very and that's not a bad thing. It's always meant to be referential to all the other comic books, but in terms of like truly original material, I think that that's Kurt's sort of masterpiece, made obviously all the better for Carlos's beautiful artwork on it.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're completely in sync on that book, and I agree with you. I think that in terms of Kurt's finest work, I think Aerosmith is where he is himself in all senses. Not well, he's himself in Astro City too, but as you said, it's more referential, and this one is more his own stuff. Felipe says, thanks for answering all the questions. Thank you for asking. I hope you read more of your work in the future. You will, and we know where you live. So if you don't, and thanks to David for bringing you here. Thank you for watching and for his tireless effort to make us enjoy every week. That's nice.
Thank you, David. So this is probably a good place to start.
Yes, we're past those 15 minutes we said. So thank you so much for being here, James.
Thank you. Yes.
Hope to see you very soon. Please don't cut because I want to say proper thank you when we're off the air. And to all of you, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Be decent. Remember, we are not out of the woods yet. Wear your mask. We're still being vaccinated.
That's right.
Don't be assholes. Don't be assholes. Let's care for people. There's light by the end of the tunnel, like that one in the back. Let's go there. Let's wait. We've been waiting for 16, 17 months now. Let's not screw it for a couple more months, okay? So see you tomorrow. We'll be here with Son Makievich, the editor-in-chief and vice president of the Skybound, the Kirkman people.
Yeah.
See you there. Thank you, James, again.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
And we